We begin today on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, right at the beginning of the Amud. So here, the Gemara that we learned today, the entire blot, will be speaking about the halacha we mentioned yesterday regarding the rakov of a mace, which is the dust that comes from a body that decayed. So when you touch that, there's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that you become tameh. But as we'll see over here, in this halacha l'Moshe Misinai, there's many details and limitations exactly when that tumah of this dust of the body applies. So sagt the Gemara Tana Rabbanan Ezehu Meis Sheyesh Loi Rakov. When does this halacha apply that a dead body, that there's dust from it, that it's tameh? Meis Shenikba Adam, so it has to be a mace that was buried undressed. Ba'arain Shel Shayish, and he's buried in a marble coffin. Oyal Gabi Ritzpa Shel Avonim, or he's buried on a floor which is from rocks. Zehu Meis Sheyesh Loi Rakov. This is a mace that the dust that comes from his decayed body, there's the halacha of rakov, that is metame. The point here is that in all of these situations that the Braisa just mentioned, it's just the physical body and there's no other material that gets mixed into this dust. But nikbar b'ksusai, if he's buried in a garment, he's buried in tachrichim, ba'arin shel eitz, he's buried in a wooden coffin, or he's buried on a floor that's from bricks. So this is a mace that has no rakov. The halacha that the dust is metame does not apply, because from these various materials it gets mixed in together with the decayed body, and it's not just the rakov of the body alone. So this halacha l'Moshe Misinai that the rakov is metame does not apply. Ula said, Ein rakov. This halacha of rakav only applies ela habab min habasar mina gidim umina atzamis. It has to be from the body. The dust has to have in it from the flesh, from the sinews, and from the bones. In other words, it has to be decayed from all of them together. If it's just from one of them, it's not metame. So Rav asks Ola on this. The Braisa says rakav habab min habasar, the dust that comes from the flesh of a decayed body, tahir. So that will be tar. So that's the Braisa. So what do we understand from this? Ha mina etzem tameh. But it seems like all it's saying is that if it comes from the flesh alone, then there's no tumah. But if it comes from the bones of the body, then it would be tameh. Va'af hagav deleke basa. Even though there is nothing from the basa that's in this dust, just coming from the bone alone. So the Gemara says, no, don't be medayik that way. It's not a question on Ola. Eime hachi. Rather be medayik as follows. Rekev haba mina basar tahir. The dust that comes just from the flesh, that's tahir. Sheyesh etzem bibasar. Unless you have that the rakov comes from both, there's the bones, from the bones and from the flesh as well. Okay, but the Gemara still asks, but ha leke gidim, but still there are no sinews that this rakov is coming from. If the Braisa would mean to say that it has to be from sinews as well, so then the Braisa should say that the rekev that comes from the basar and from the etzem is still tahir. All the Braisa says is that the rekev that comes from basar alone is going to be tahir. So it's mashma from the Braisa, if there's basar and from the etzem, from the bones, it's already tameh. But so it's mashma even without any of the sinews, it's still going to be tameh. All is said, or tar that is. Again, even without the sinews, it's going to be tameh. And all is said that it has to be all three. It has to be dust that comes from the basar, the etzem, and the sinews, and the gidim. So the Gemara answers, the reason the Braisa doesn't mention that is because if you have the rekev, this dust that comes from the flesh and the bones, it's impossible that there shouldn't be sinews as well, because the sinews is what holds together the basar and the atzamais. So it's obvious, it doesn't have to mention it. So Taisus over here, I think, says Ula did mention it because there is actually a possibility by a nafel. The Gemara mentioned before regarding a fetus or a baby, a nafel that was miscarried. So the basar and the atzamais are not yet, the limbs are not yet properly held together. So there it's possible that it should be without gidim. That's why Ula mentions it. But the Braisa is not talking about such a case. Regularly, basar and atzamais means that there's gidim as well. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Abba, Amar Rav Yechanan, another halacha about this rakov. Shnei meisim shekavram zeh zeh, two bodies that were buried together. So there's no halacha of rakov. The dust of these decayed bodies will not be metame. And nasu galgalin zeh lazeh. They become galgalin one to another. What does galgalin mean? Galgalin means According to one pshat, galgalim means they sort of like a roll together, so they mix with one another. The rakov, the dust that comes from these two bodies that decayed, that are buried together, so because they get mixed with one another, they're mevatel one another of this tumah that there is by rakov. The tumah of rakov only applies when there's a body that's buried itself. Mos of Rav Nasan, so Rav Nasan asked on this, it says in the Braise, Rakov haba mi beis mesim tamei. The Braise clearly says that the rakov that comes from two mesim is tamei. Amarave, so Rav answers, it depends. So over there, what that Braise is speaking about is shekovru zeh b'fnei atzmai v'zeh b'fnei atzmai. The bodies were buried originally separately. So once they were each buried separately, so the halacha of rakov, that the dust of each body alone will be metame, does apply. V'hirkivu, and then these bodies got decayed, and then the two bodies mixed together after they were buried separately. Then they got mixed together, and v'amdu al maloi tarved rekev. And all that's left from these two bodies is you have the shear, the minimum amount that we learned before, the maloi tarved rekev, a spoonful of this dust from the two bodies together, so it will be metame. But the point is that as long as originally they were buried separately, so the halacha of rakov goes according to that time period. If they were buried separately, so then the halacha of the tumah from rekev applies. If they were buried originally together, so then they're mevatel on each other, and even after there's the dust that comes from these bodies, it's not going to be metame. If the hair of this body was cut, the kavre imay, and then it was buried together with the body, nasaloi galgalin, the hair becomes galgalin. This term galgalin, the Gemara uses to say that it's mevatel, the halacha of rakov from the body. Galgalin again means that it rolls, it's together with the body. So there's the rakov that comes from the body and from the hairs which were cut and is separate, and it mixes together with the body. The halacha of rakov does not apply if there's something else mixing in. Even these hairs that originally came from the body, but now it's cut. Based on this, the Gemara will try to answer a shaila on a Mishnah in a different place. So, Nan Hasam, it says in the Mishnah, Mesechta Alois, Kol Shebemeis Tome. Every part of the body from the meis is Tome. Chutz min hashinayim, besides the teeth, v'aseyer, the hairs, v'atzipoirin, and the nails. Ubishas chiburan, but when it's still attached to the body, kulan tmein. Even these parts that we just mentioned there will also be metame. Now, boy Chizkiah, on that Mishnah, Chizkiah asked the Shaila, Sarai ha'oimed legaleach. The hairs of the body which are supposed to be cut. What does it mean it's supposed to be cut? It means that the hairs are very long hairs. The Rosh over here says that there was a certain amount of length of hair in those times that they used to cut it. So this is hairs of the dead body that should be cut, even though it wasn't cut yet. Tzipayren ha'oimed ligazes, or the nails which are very long, and it should be cut, but it's not cut. So what's going to be the halacha? Mi amrina, do I say, that these hairs or nails that is set to be cut, even though it wasn't cut yet, it's as if it's cut, it's long enough, it's as if it's a separate entity of the body, and it's not metame like the body itself. Or I say, it wasn't cut yet, it's physically still attached to the body, so therefore it's metame like the rest of the body, as long as it's mechuber, like the Mishnah said. That was the Shaila of Chizkiah. So now the Gemara says, let's resolve this question from what Rabbi Bar Chana said before. What did Rabbi Bar Chana say? That if you take hair that was cut from this body and you bury it together with the body, so now the tumah of rakov does not apply because it's mixed together with the hair. So what do we understand from what Rabbi Bar Chana said? Time and mishum de gazas. The only reason why it's mevatel, the din of rakov from this body, is because the hair was already cut. Holei gazas. But if the hair was not yet cut, loy. So then it seems like Rabbi Bar Chana is saying that it's not mevatel din of rakov, meaning as long as it's physically attached to the body, it's part of the body, and it's not a separate thing that mixes together with the body. So the same thing we could say b'chlal regarding the tumah, that as long as it's still attached to the body, it's still metame, it's still mechuba like the rest of the body. So the Gemara says you can't prove anything from what Rabbi Bar Chana said. Why? Loy. Because hachi ka'ama. This is what Rabbi Bar Chana said. Gazaz, if the hairs of the body were cut and was buried together with the body, harei zeh gal galam. So this is rolling it's together with the body, and it's mevatel the din of rakov. Loy gozaz, if the hair was not yet cut from the body, mibayale. So then that may be something that Rabbi Babachana didn't say clearly, because that's part of the ibaya chizkiya. Since it's supposed to be cut, should it be considered as if it's already cut or not as if it's already cut? Or actually, Taisus says, based on the Gemara and Amud Beis, we'll see that it's possible that the hairs of the body is not considered to be part of the body regarding this halacha of Rakav. It's possible even if it's not oimidli gazis. Stam, hairs of the body could be considered to be a separate entity of the body itself, which is mevatel din of Rakav. That there's a suffix about that. Once the hairs are cut, for sure it's mevatel, the din of Rakav from the body. But if the hair is not cut, it could be set to be cut because it's very long, or even if it's not set to be cut, it's not long, possibly it's an ibaya. Maybe it is mevatel, maybe it's not mevatel. So that's something that Rabbi Babachana didn't say clearly because it's an ibaya. Rabbi Yirmiyah had another shaila. Rekev haba min ha'akev. The dust of a decayed body that comes only from the heels of the body. Mahu, what's the halacha? Why should the heels of the body be any different? Ki gamrina and rakav, when there's this halacha l'maishem misina that the dust of the body is metame haba mekulimes. That's the rekev that comes from any of the rest of the body. But the dust that comes just from the heels of the body that decays, over there it doesn't apply. And the reason why it doesn't apply is because the Rishonim here say because the body, the rest of the body has life in it, and therefore after it decays, so on that the halach l'maishem sinai applied that the dust of that part of the body becomes tameh or is metame. But the heel of a person's body is a very thick skin and it has very little life in it. There's a lashon that Rebbe used to quote very often from Avos the Rab Nosson. It says that the okev, the heel of a person's body, is the malach hamavis sheba adam. It's like the part of the body where it's thick skin and it has, you don't feel any chayis in it. You don't feel any life in it. So maybe when that part of the body decays, the halacha l'moshe misinai that the dust is metame is not applied. Oidilme, or perhaps loishna, there's no difference. The halacha l'moshe misinai includes even the dust that comes from the heel of the body. Tashema, so the Gemara says, let's prove this from the brayso that we quoted before. The Tani Rab Nasim B'Rabbi Shia Rakav Haba Mishnei Mesim Tami. If you have the dust that came from a combination of two mesim, it'll be metame. And as it said before in the Gemara, we're talking about this Rakav that came from two mesim, and it's the exact minimum shear of Rakav. The Malay Tarvet, it's exact minimum shear in order to be metame. Now, but the question is, how could this be metame? If you're going to say that if this rakav came from the heel, that it's not metame, so then how do you know when you have the minimum, the exact amount of rakav that came from the dust of these two bodies that it'll be metame? Zil hacha dil mederech akev kasi. The dust that came from one of the bodies, maybe it just came from the heel of that body. V'hacha, or the dust that came from the other body, also maybe it came from the heel of that body. Since we're talking here about the exact amount that comes from these two bodies together, how do you know that it would be metama for sure? It's mashma the lashon of this brayso that we're talking about a vadai tumah, but really it should be a suffix. You don't know if this dust came from the body or from the heel of the body.
From one bed, from one mess.
And a chanami from one mess would be the same shaila, but the Gemara is proving it from this beferish brayso that talks about two bodies. And it says that if you have the minimum amount that comes from two bodies, that it's metame. So the Gemara is asking, when you see dust that comes from a decayed body, or in this case two bodies, how do you know that it doesn't come from the heel? So the Gemara says as follows: the arkiv kulemes, in a situation where you have the entire dead body that was buried or that was already fully decayed, the kaasi derech hakev, and there's the dust that comes from the body, and it could also be coming from the heel, hachanami. In such a case, we're going to say that there is going to be a tumah, because we're going to say that since the entire body decayed, so then this dust is coming, could be from the heel, but it's also coming from the entire body. Elahacha, but over here, the shaila of Rabbi Yirmiyah, when he was speaking about the dust that comes just from the heel, kogain the irkiv chadever, v'kaasi derech hakev. What he was speaking about is a body that was not buried yet, and the entire body did not decay yet. It's only the foot, there's only one section of the body that decayed. So over there, in that case, the dust is coming only from the heel, or from the heel and a little bit from the foot. I mean, the Rosh of it, the Taisus from its mashma that the Gemara here is saying, it's not speaking only about a case where literally just the heel decayed, because then you don't have basar, gidim, and atzomos. It has to be a little bit more than just the heel. It has to be the whole aver at least. But because the rest of the body did not decay yet, and it's only that little section of the body that decayed, that was the shaila of Rabbi Yirmiyah, whether the halacha of rekev, that it's matame, applies. That was his shaila. And Teiku, and this shaila is not resolved. By Rabbi Yirmiyah asked another shaila, based on what we said before, that a body that the din of rokov applies, it has to be just the body without anything else that mixes in. So uber b'mei isha, a fetus in the womb of a woman, after she passed away, and now there's also a fetus with this body. Havel galgalim oiloi, is that a separate entity that mixes in with her body that takes away this tumah of rekev, or maybe not? What's the basis of the question? Kivin mama, since it was said that a fetus is considered to be like the thigh of the mother, it's like part of the body of the mother. So hilkach gufuhu, so therefore it's like part of the body. It's not a separate entity that's mixing in. It's not something else that's mevatel the tumah of rekev. Perhaps I could say, even the Seifei Lot says this fetus eventually would be coming out, would be born as a separate entity. So mifresh parish mina, it's like a separate entity from the mother itself. So if the mother is together with a fetus, the body is together with another entity in it, and therefore the tumah of rekev does not apply. If regarding this ibaya here, you would resolve and say, Ubar, the Seifei Lot says that the fetus, since he's eventually being born, mifresh parish mina, it's considered to be like a separate entity. So the question would be another kind of mixture in the body of a woman that's much less. Shichva zera b'meisha, a semen that's in the body of a woman. So is that considered to be a separate entity that's mevatel the halacha of rokov? Mahu. Mi amrinan, do I say, kivin d'liyitzar, since there's not yet a formation of a fetus, kigufa dami, so this is like part of her body, and it's not mevatel the tumah of rokov, there's no other entity here. Or since there is another substance that's here in her body, it's not just purely her body alone, light, so the tumah of rekev does not apply anymore. Another shaila similar by Rav Papa. Rav Papa asked the shaila, pirshamahu. What's if you have the perish, the waste, the food waste, the waste in the person's body, and he passed away? Does that take away the tumah of rekev because there's something else mixed in? So do I say, since she can't live without food, so even this waste that's in the body, but it's considered to be part of the body itself, it's part of the life, what sustains the body. It's not a separate entity. Or perhaps I could say, no, this peresh in the body, it's something that's considered to be from the outside, a separate entity in the body, because it didn't get digested. It's not part of the body itself. It's waste. It's food waste inside the body. And it will be mevatel the tumah of rekev. So he asked regarding the body itself. What's with the skin of the body? The halacha of rekev, does that apply only to when you have the body itself without the skin? The skin itself is considered to be an entity for itself, or it's a part of the body that takes away this halacha l'mishmisina, this tumah of rekev. By Rav Huna bar Menoyach, kichoy v'niyoy ma'u, a body that has in it kichoy v'niyoy, the saliva or other fluids that's inside the body. Mahu, is that considered to be another mixture in the body that takes away the tumah of rekev? Now, Amalei Rav Shmuel bar Acha Rav Papa. So Rav Shmuel bar Acha asks Rav Papa about these shilas that we just asked there. V'yisol kedaitoch. Now, if you're going to say Kol Hani de Ka'ama Hava Galgalin, that all these that we just mentioned here, that it's considered to be Galgalin. Again, Galgalin means that it's another mixture that takes away the tumah of the rekev. So then Rekev de Metame Heichem Mishkachasla. So how is it possible for there ever to be this halacha that the dust of a decayed body would be metame? If you're saying that as long as the skin or even any other fluid, saliva in the body, that it takes away this tumah, so then any body that has skin or saliva, so there's no tumah of rekev ever applying. So the Gemara says, you're right, in a regular case it won't apply, but it'll be in the following case. The ashke made the kolim. If this person, right before he passed away, he drank from a certain stream of water that comes between a palm tree, whatever kind of water this is, but it's a certain kind of drink that completely cleanses and dries up the body. So there's no other fluids and no other waste that's inside the body. And additionally, v'sachya nosha, the body was then smeared with some kind of cream, some kind of that it removes hairs from no hairs in the body. So this is something actually that Taisus and the Mefarshim here discuss. The Gemara before didn't clearly say that hairs on the body would be vakel the halacha of rakav. It mentioned about the skin, but it didn't mention anything about the hairs. So because the Gemara says this here now, some want to be guided actually before in the Gemara, instead of oirai, sairai, that it really also is talking about the hairs. Okay, either way. And then additionally, if we're saying that also the skin on the body it takes away the halacha of rakav, so it's going to have to be a body that was buried without any skin on it. And v'sholka b'mei Tverya. This body was left in the hot waters from the springs of Tverya, and the skin was removed from the body. Only then will the halacha of rakav apply, which basically means that in a regular situation, this tumah of rakav would not apply. Amar Abaye said another halacha about the tumah of rakav. Naktinon. We have a tradition about this halacha that meis shetachnoi ein lo rakav. A dead body, if it was ground, in other words, it's not in its original natural state when it died, but it was ground, changed its condition, so the halacha of rakav, that this dust of it does not apply. In other words, it has to be dust that came from it naturally, not something else that caused it. So on this the Shaila was asked, Tachnoi, if the body was originally changed, not naturally, it was ground. But then after that, the body naturally did decay. So mahu, what's going to be the halacha? Does the tumah of rekav apply? Do I say midi hu time ela de ikke basa gidim vatsamis? Do I say the reason why the tumah of rekav applies is because this is the dust that comes from the body that has the bones, the flesh, the bones, and the sinews. So v'ha'ike, even though it was ground from before, but now the body did decay, and you have now the dust of the body. This halacha of rakav only applies if it is as it was created and the natural death of the body without any change of it. Here, the body, there was something done to the body in between, so therefore the tumah of rakav does not apply. Teiku, this remains unresolved. Tani Ola Bachanina taught about this tumah of rakav. Meis shechaser, a dead body that is missing any part of the body, even a tiny drop, ein le rakav. The halacha of the tumah of rekav does not apply. And also, v'loi tfusa. There's another halacha of tfusa does not apply either. What's the halacha of tfusa? If you want to relocate a body that's buried in one place, so you'd have to take not only that body, but the soft earth, and actually till three finger breadths down in the ground have to be removed together with the body. That's the idea of tfusa, that he grabs the area around them that has to be removed together with the mace itself. So if this is a mace that was buried and it's chaser, there's something missing of it, so then the halacha of tfusa does not apply. And also v'loi shchunas kvaris, the halacha of shchunas kvaris. Once you find 3 people buried in one area, so then you're chayshish that there are more people buried in that area, and that becomes a beis hakvaris. You can't move it. You have to leave that as a beis hakvaris. But if there's one a part of that's missing from the body, so then this halacha of shchunas kvaris does not apply. Taisus actually says on this that bepashtus, logically it's hard to understand. So Taisus says v'tzarachi and lama doesn't make sense, because the point here is once you see 3 people are buried in this area, logically it's possible that there are others buried here. So that's a sign to know that it's a beis hakvaris. So what difference does it make if the mace is chaser? Why should that change that svara? So Taisus says Taisus doesn't give any explanation. It's a halacha l'moshe misinai that this is the way it is, and that's it. So there's no explanation for this. So on this the Gemara asks meisvei. So here there's a brayse, or this is actually a mishnah, a Masechta Idias, that discusses that mishnah. There's a machlokes there when you have an aver, one limb that comes from a live person, or you have one aver that comes from a dead body. So the aver that comes from a dead body causes tumah. The question is, aver that comes from a live body, does that cause tumah or not? So there's a machlokes there in that mishnah. So I believe it's Rabbi Shua there in that mishnah. He's trying to prove that you can't compare the aver that comes from a live body to the aver that comes from a dead body. And he explains the difference. It's a law, you can't compare them, because when you have an aver that comes from a dead body. So here I see that there are certain stringencies in its tumah. Sheyesh lo roiv. There's a halacha of roiv when you have roiv minyanai or roiv binyanai. If you have most of the bones or most of the structure of the body, it causes tumah. V'roiva. There's also a halacha of roiva when you have a certain amount of a roiva of a calf, a certain measurement of the body, it causes tumah. Or this halacha that we're speaking about here, this halacha of a spoon of this dust that causes tumah. That's the stringencies that applies by a mace. When it comes though to a limb that comes from a live body, she'ein loy roiv, the halacha of roiv binyanei, this halacha does not apply. V'loy roiva, the halacha of roiva, this measurement of roiva, kav that causes tumah does not apply either. And v'loy meloy tarva rekev, and the halacha of this rekev that we're speaking about does not apply either when it comes to a limb from a live body. So now what do we see from that Mishnah? It seems from that Mishnah that this halacha of rekev would apply to one limb that comes from a dead body, even if it's not the full body, like Ula said. As the Gemara explains, in Ahechidami, what are we speaking about? The Akev Chad Rekev, Chad Ever. What happened is when the Mishnah there speaks about a limb that comes from a live body, so we're speaking about one limb that came from the live body, and it's decayed, and that one limb, the rekev, does not apply to that one limb of the live body. So the chvasa gabi meis. So seemingly, what the Mishnah is contrasting it is to the one limb that comes from the dead body, and afilu chad ever, and even if it's just one limb, iker rekev. The halacha of the dust that's matame does apply. So I see that it doesn't have to be a full body for this halacha of rekev to apply. So the Gemara says, not necessarily. Mikatani ha mace. Does it clearly say there in that Mishnah that if it's a mace, similar to the one aver it's speaking about regarding the aver that comes from a live body, that there's no tum of rekev? Does it clearly say in the Mishnah that by the mace, when it's telling you the stringencies of the mace, it's only talking about one limb of the mace? It's not. Hakamashmalon. Rather, this is what the Mishnah means to say. Shum mace yesh le rekev. There is any kind of there is some case by a mace where the halacha of rekev applies. And when is that? Only if the full body is intact. Shum chai ein le rekev. But there's never a situation where you have from a live body, from a limb of a live body, where the tumah of rekev applies. So this is still considered to be a stringency that I find by a mace that I don't find by an aver that comes min achai. So, but again, the tumah of rekev by the mace does not refer to just one limb that came from the mace, but the entire body of the mace. And that's the stringency that you find by a mace, not like by an aver that comes from a chai. Rav asked a shaila, hirkiv kishuhu chai. If this limb of the body decayed when it came from the body that was alive, but then afterwards the person passed away. So mahu, what's going to be the halacha here? Do I say ki gemiri rekev? When is the halacha l'moshe misina that rekev is metame? The irkiv kishuhu meis. When it decayed, when the whole body was intact, and the body is not alive. So therefore over here, what happened? This one limb decayed already, and there's the dust that came from this one limb when the rest of the body was still alive. So it can't be combined to the rest of the body. You don't have a full body here that is the din of rekev. Or perhaps hashtemi hamais. Even though originally it was only one limb from a live body that decayed, but now the rest of the body, the body is dead. So now I do combine this rekev from this one limb with the rest of the body that's now dead. Tashamas, the Gemara again brings the same price or the same mission that we just quoted. You can't compare the tumah of an aver that comes from a mace to the tumah of an aver that comes from a chai. When it comes to a mace, sheyesh le'roi v'roiva amaloi targed rekev. It has these stringencies that apply to it, and one of them is the halacha of rekev. When it comes to a limb that comes from a live body, and over there, this halacha of rekev does not apply. So what do I see from that Mishnah? Taimim mishum chai seems to be saying that the reason why the tumah of rekev does not apply when this limb comes from a live body is because the rest of the body is still alive. It's only one aver that came from this body. Homes, but it's mashma that if the person then died, so now the whole body is dead, yesh le rekev. So then, even though originally this one aver became dust before the rest of the body died, but now the tumah of rekev will apply. So the Gemara again says, like it said before, no, there's no raya from there. Mi katani hameis. Does it clearly? Could you be medayik this? Does it clearly say there in that Mishnah that if the rest of the body died, then the tumah of rekev will apply? It doesn't say that. So hakamashmalon. This all that Mishnah was saying was to shumeis yesh le rekev. There is a halacha of rekev that applies to a mace. Not in this situation where first one aver became dust and then the rest of the aver did. When the person dies. When the whole body together is rekev, then the tumah of rekev applies. But shum chai ein le rekev. When the body is alive, there's never a halacha of rekev that applies. So therefore, there's no raya there from that brayso to the sibaya of Rava.